Building the perfect underdog best ball Mania 3 team. That's what we're going to talk about today on Stealing Bananas. I'm Ben Gretch. You can find my newsletter at bengretch.substack.com. With me, as always, is Shawn Siegele. You can find all of his great work at RotoViz. Shawn always does such a great job of talking about how you need to subscribe to my newsletter. You obviously have to be subscribed to RotoViz. I hope that goes without saying. Everything Shawn writes is can't miss, must-read stuff. And Shawn, we decided to jump into a best ball mania. It just filled as I was saying this introduction. So we found out our draft spot at that time. It is the same as we've had on both of our recent shows. Part of the reason we thought we'd hop in another draft was to maybe mix it up. We have this knack of getting the same draft spots repeatedly, but we are at the 104 on Underdog. So maybe it'll be a little bit different over here how we approach it. How you doing?
Good. We're on a hot streak. We got these 104s. Getting the same spot of 104 is a lot different than getting the same spot of 110. We did go Justin Jefferson the last two times. And I just moved Jefferson to number 3 in my rankings, Ben. If we're going to get this much Allen Robinson hype, some of that has to come from Cooper Kupp. And it would make sense that Jefferson is the other player kind of in that mix. But you know that I also believe that Jamar Chase could be just a record-breaking wide receiver this season. And he's obviously a great fit for tournaments. We just got on the clock. The first 3 picks, McCaffrey, Taylor, Kupp. Who do you like here?
It's a Chase team. We've done 2 Jeffersons in a row. I talked about wanting to balance my exposures a little, but we've got some Jefferson. It's a Chase team. We can't go 3 in a row. It is interesting that in all 3 of these, we had that decision. We didn't get a single one where Jefferson snuck into the top 3, or Chase, who can, but more commonly, Jefferson definitely sneaks into the top 3 at times. We did not. We got the same top 3 in all 3 of these drafts. Same decision at 104. We're going to build Chase this time, and I like it.
And obviously, one of the things that we'll be looking at a little bit now is that Week 17 potential epic clash between the Bengals and the Bills. Obviously, a lot of focus on that game. We won't be the only team in the tournament trying to build through that. And yet, we do think we can do some other things to then potentially win the regular season title, right? $1 million up for grabs with that. And sometimes that gets lost a little bit in the focus on how you can play these Week 16 and Week 17 games. With Chase, I think we also have a great anchor for the regular season. As I mentioned, we won't be the only team playing through that. Stephon Diggs is the 106 today. And so Bills, Bengals, people love that game.
Yeah, it won't be surprising to see him potentially go, or him or her potentially go with Higgins in the second. Since then, 5 running backs and Kelsey, sort of the usual suspects. Cook, Derrick Henry, Najee Harris off the board. Eckler was before that. Aaron Jones goes at 201. And then CeeDee Lamb here at 202. Devontae Adams, 203. It's coming off kind of quick, but we got a little bit of a shuffle at the back end of the first and early second. We are sort of in that same area, I think, that we're typically in, looking at the same types of players. We've talked about Saquon a little bit in this spot. We've talked about Javonte Williams the last show. Mark Andrews, this is not tight end premium, so Mark Andrews still sitting there as we approach. Kyle Pitts falls to the 3rd sometimes. I'm very happy to just take Pitts at 209 any chance I get, but might be worth considering waiting for the 3rd round on him. We're a pick away. You're loading up the queue. Saquon at the top feels like a really nice pick at 209 to get that anchor running back.
Yeah, if we can just get through one more drafter here. I don't think that we're going to, but if we could get through one more drafter, that would be an incredible start. Oh, Ben, Mark Andrews goes. So Saquon is an option for us. We could also just go hardcore Bengals and go with T. Higgins.
I think we got to take this Saquon opportunity. His ADP is at 17.7 now. We're back at pick 21. Nice little slide on a player we do like and do want to get some exposure to. Chase Barkley, fun start. Very talented players. Those are players with extreme athletic profiles.
Just crazy. And There are still some concerns about Barkley. In some ways, this is similar to chasing David Johnson and Le'Veon Bell once they were no longer, what they had been and what we hoped they could be again. But the situation that Barkley has now with the New York Giants, even though obviously this is half PPR, maybe if he has a 90 catch season, that's minimized a little bit in this format. But if he goes 90 catches, he's going to get an absolute ton of yards. He's going to score a lot of touchdowns because he has big play ability in space. I've moved Barkley up into the first round in my rankings, I believe. I did another little update today. He's definitely right on the edge, if not in the first round. And so, I mean, I'm trying not to reach for him because I do have a lot of Barkley early, and it's you look at those shares in the third round and you're thinking, well, how do I beat those teams if I'm drafting him at the 1-2 turn? But it's important not to think that way, right? Because there are going to be so many other things that are changed up as well. You get to draft a full team. You need to pick the best players when you're on the clock.
Absolutely. The turn included a few more running back picks. We're one pick away now. Kyle Pitts is still available, and he does not go. AJ Brown is the top of the queue, but I mean, there's not a lot of players that I would take over AJ Brown. I think Kyle Pitts is the pick here.
Yeah, I've been picking him in almost all of my drafts. We'll see if that works out. I did have an article up today, and we're recording this on Thursday. It will be released in a few days, but looking at how to build a hyper-fragile juggernaut in underdog formats using intel from the Roster Construction Explorer, building off of some fantastic work from Connor O'Driscoll, Michael Dubner, Blair Andrews, all of the familiar names there that you love and read for your best ball info. Kyle Pitts, a big part of that. Even when you're going hyper fragile, you want to get that elite tight end. And now, then we don't exactly know what type of build this will be. The fourth and fifth rounds will determine that to a large extent, but this could be an anchor running back build with the elite tight end. We could end up going very wide receiver heavy from here. We could take a couple more running backs. So many different directions. I mean, if we go pretty wide receiver heavy, I tend to think of this really as a modified 0 RB build. But to have Barkley, Chase, and Pitts, I mean, those might be I don't think it's going out on a limb to say they're 3 of the 10 most talented players at the skill positions in the NFL. I understand why they're at these spots, and I'm certainly not saying that other drafters are making big mistakes or anything like that. But I also do think this is kind of the dream start.
It really is. It's a fantastic start. We've talked about how in the tight end premium formats, getting the opportunity to pair a Chase or a Jefferson or one of the top 5 picks with Pitts is just sort of unfair. When you get to the half PPR, I still think with the benefits of elite tight end that the Pitts should still be a late second. I mean, I guess in tight end premium, we've talked about how he should be a late first. So obviously we think he should be a late second. The ability to get him in the early third round for what his profile is, we've talked about think of him like a second-year breakout receiver. You'd be all over him. For some reason, people aren't maybe as excited because it is just unique that he is a tight end. But yet that provides this really big advantage, obviously. He's covering a tight end spot. Drake London, adding to the team, I think is probably a positive, right? He had no one to provide cover last year. Russell Gage was, gobbling up a lot of targets, but I don't think putting a lot of stress on defenses necessarily. London might be able to do that a little more. It could be a big second year for Pitts. It's just a profile we definitely want to target. You mentioned it with Barkley. I mean, he's been rising. He could be done. He was good before that ankle injury. He was not even playing full snaps after it. The efficiency was way below his career numbers. I tend to think he just wasn't really healthy. It's been 2 tough seasons for him in a row, but I don't think his best days are completely over. And, we haven't seen like a long-term precipitous decline, mostly just injury-related lack of efficiency. So still have a lot of hope for him. I was hoping we might get Gabriel Davis back to us. We're a pick away. You have him in the queue. You talked about that Cincinnati Buffalo stack. You did make it back to us. You also have Breece Hall in there. I don't mind getting another running back, but I do think with only one receiver in the first 3, Davis feels like a nice pick here.
Yeah, I think we need to take that upside within the context of this build. I mean, there's a very good chance that Davis actually does end up fairly overvalued from a full season perspective. And I think that we do want to make sure that we're going after that regular season title in the same way that we would a tournament title. And yet, the overall upside, if he does what we think he has a chance to do, and then certainly putting him there with Jamar Chase, you looked at week 17 and it's hard not to dream about how that will work out. And again, we talked about it on our last show where we did add Gabriel Davis in the pros versus Joes, and we were very excited about that. So anybody who wants even more background with him, make sure you listen there. We're going to be back up here in 2 picks. Ben, this is a little bit softer area. I've moved Rashad Bateman into the queue.
Can you hit the wide receiver tab?
Yeah.
So it's Cooks, Brandon Cooks, Bateman, Darnell Mooney, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Godwin. I could see Amon-Ra. I could see Godwin now that we got some better health news. But I'm fine with Bateman. I don't love. I think he's a little overvalued. I don't love where he's going in drafts. At the same time, he's not a player that I want to be avoiding. He definitely has that year 2 upside profile. Just not a smash of a rookie year necessarily. So I feel like we have the 2 elements. He's got to be better, and the pass rate's going to come down. They ran the most plays in football last year. They were actually not even positive in pass rate over expected. They just were in a ton of pass heavy scripts or passing situations. They weren't nearly as low on the pass rate over expected scale as other recent seasons. But the expectation is, if you look at like Vegas lines, Vegas win over unders, this team's going to be better this year. So even if they're at the same PROE as last year, pass rate over expected, they would still have that pass rate come down. Some of it was just situational, right? And then the play volume was way above any other team, number 1 and by a lot. So then that probably has to come down. They're a team that was in a lot of frantic games, those back and forth shootouts late that elevate play volume. And so I don't think that's the element that's being baked in enough. I think people look at last year's target volume and they say vacated targets, Marquise Brown, this, that. That's going to come down some. It could come down a ton if they really shift back towards the run heavy, but I think it comes down even if they don't shift back, is the argument I'm making. So kind of a 2-step with Bateman. He's got to be better, and we also need the pass volume to still stay pretty high, and some of those gains in 2021 to carry over. It's certainly possible, but that's why I say that he's a little bit rich where he is going for me, but not a bad player to have on your roster. Incredible profile. Obviously, with Brown out of there, he has all the runway in the world to step into a very meaningful role in the offense.
And you mentioned he's got that great profile coming out of college. He's a speed receiver. He's going to have more vertical routes with Brown gone. And I just don't think that there are going to be other players outside of obviously Mark Andrews who demand much at all in the way of targets in this offense. And I think between the 2 of them, even with a small pie, they can really feed, especially if Lamar Jackson is creating a lot of upside for this offense, creating a lot of points for this offense, and attacking vertically the way that we know that he can. Blair Andrews is going to have another cool article out about receivers taking that jump from year 1 to year 2. It is going to focus on some of the rookie year numbers. And as you mentioned, Bateman actually doesn't hit a lot of the thresholds or just the general profile that we'd like to see from our rookies taking a year 2 leap. But I still feel pretty comfortable looking at the profile and the potential volume there. We slide back around, and again, a little bit of a soft area, but 3 names we like: in Elijah Moore, Devontae Smith, and Drake London.
Yeah, and I don't have a strong opinion on any, and none of them really have strong correlation, or really any correlation with what we're doing. So I say we take Moore as the highest ADP guy and hope that one of the other 2 slips back a little easier just playing that game. Does that make sense?
That sounds good here. And then we can start to look for Joe Burrow as we come back around, if we like, put him with Jamar Chase.
London does actually obviously correlate with Pitts. I was missing that. I was looking at the teams they're playing against, but I don't know that I like adding London and Pitts on the same roster. We've talked a little bit about that. I think when you're making the bet in a big tournament on Pitts, you're expecting him to really be a star. It might mean that London doesn't have a breakaway rookie season. They can hit in alternating weeks as well, but when you're filling the tight end spot, especially, you're really hoping that your tight end's hitting every week and being that elite element to your offense. So, or your fantasy, roster, however you want to frame that. But I don't hate it. Devonta Smith goes off. We can certainly consider it. London's one of the top. He's the second available receiver behind Thielen. Burrow is the top available QB. And you've also added Trey Lance. Trey Lance goes ahead of Burrow. Burrow is second now in the queue at all positions, behind only Thielen. And he goes a pick before us to the guy who took Cooper Kupp. Fun.
Well, one of the advantages to selecting Chase early is that you often will get Burrow a little bit below ADP. We were hoping he would slide one more pick there. Is it London here, or do you want to jump down for Wilson or Brady?
No, let's do London. We only have 5 seconds here. I'm still shook by the did he take Higgins in the second or third round? Can you click on his team real quick? We got a couple picks to work back up. He did take Higgins in the second round. Okay. But he had Herbert. So he's got the Herbert, Mike Williams, the Burrow, Higgins. Only has 3 receivers through 7 rounds. All right. You got to just tip the cap, I guess. At least it wasn't unstacked. I would have been a little more annoyed if it was just fully unstacked. So, one reason I liked London there, our backstop, Garrett Wilson. I mean, I was just talking about the London Pitts thing, but we took Elijah Moore in this draft, so our Garrett Wilson backstop, we might be looking at QB in that spot instead of getting 2 Jets as well. We're going to be, if we were to grab Wilson, pretty loaded up on some questionable passing games. We don't have great QB options now with Chase off the board. Well, the Barkley pick might make Daniel Jones an intriguing late round option because I think their upside scenarios are correlated with the Brian Dable stuff, that the offense is just really good. Barkley is a high target rate guy whenever he's been on the field, basically. So I don't mind the QB running back stack at all. We're just sort of betting on the Giants being that fun offense that we've talked about recently as a possibility. We could throw in a Wan'Dale Robinson or something. We have the 2 Atlanta players, Mariota, not really. It's questionable whether he'll be playing in the most important weeks, obviously. We have Gabe Davis. We have Jamar Chase. We can't get either of their quarterbacks. We have Rashad Bateman. We can't get that quarterback. So right now we're looking at, Zach Wilson to stack with Elijah Moore, or potentially getting into the Daniel Jones thing, or getting into some unstacked quarterbacks, which some of them have options to then stack up later. But that's how we're going to have to consider the quarterback position. Russ still there as we get around the 7-8 turn. Little ways till we pick again. He is at the top of the queue, not likely to come back, but he's a fun one to backdoor stack. A lot of Denver options late.
He is. And also, you have Tom Brady in there. He can come back with Julio Jones, man. The reporting today, he's going to be a big part of this offense. You and I have quite a bit of Julio from the early going, not necessarily looking to add a lot more at elevated prices, but if you get in that situation here, it might be kind of fun. It also is a situation where I think Tom Brady is fine without being overly concerned about some of those weapons. You could easily see a week 16 or a week 17 performance in which he throws for 500 yards and those 4 receivers split the touchdowns. And so from that perspective as well, there are definitely paths for him to put up the big points and to come out ahead that there might not be for some of the other QBs who are definitely going to need their wide receiver 1 to really come through if they have the type of week 17 performance that you're thinking about in terms of winning tournaments. We actually are going to definitely have a shot at one of those 2 QBs where we're now 1 pick away, both Wilson and Brady still there.
Yep, top of the queue. The QB's sliding a little bit. Top by ADP. A lot of running backs and receivers have gone off in this round. Looks like we're going to get an auto pick here, but it was Kareem Hunt. So Wilson made it all the way back. I like what you said about Brady. I could take either of them. I think Wilson's a little more fun to stack late. Julio's so buzzy. He's a guy who could just go in the 10th in a random draft right now, so we would be kind of left out in the cold in that scenario. We do take Wilson. So we now have Wilson, Saquon, Jamar Chase, Gabe Davis, Rashad Bateman, Elijah Moore, Drake London as our 5 receivers. 3 second-year receivers and a rookie, as well as Gabe Davis, the third-year breakout. A lot of youth there. And then our second-year Kyle Pitts breakout bet. Very fun roster so far.
It is, and I think the decision to select all of those wide receivers early has been absolutely fantastic within the context of how this draft is played out. We've gotten a chance to select QBs way below ADP. We're going to have a shot at some of our favorite 0 RB options at running back. Obviously, with Pitts, we've got tight end, but there are going to be some good tight end 2 options. So we're going to have elite performance at that position. Structurally, I don't think things could have worked out much better, and especially with Saquon falling to the 209, giving us just that extra really upside play.
We're going to get Brady, Shawn. Stafford goes, couple running backs, couple receivers go. The guy ahead of us had 2 QBs. He does not take a third. You want to grab Brady and get these 2 QBs in the window?
I think so. In the window and
end of a tier for sure.
End of a tier and way below ADP.
2 nice quarterback values. That feels very good.
And again, when we look at the potential to win this tournament during the regular season, I mean, thinking of it as a full, the playoff portion of it, finishing first, finishing second, winning the 2 million, winning the 1 million. But Ben, I mean, it's a similar kind of situation. We're talking about winning the regular season tournament. One of our fantastic writers for RotoViz, Monty Fawn, who's very good in all formats. Make sure you check him out. If you haven't, he has been a former FFPC main event regular season champion. I mean, you can win the regular seasons for these. It's essentially the same deal in terms of having to finish with the very best team. And in some ways, if you have the very best team, you've got even a better shot at the regular season because it's going to be the whole thing as opposed to just a couple of weeks. I love this team because I think we're building for both elements. And like you said, mostly we've just gotten some really fun names in there. You look at the potential for that 3rd-year jump for Gabriel Davis, the 2nd-year jump for Jamar Chase, Rashad Bateman, and Elijah Moore. And some people are going to say 2nd-year jump for Jamar Chase, but that's why we're taking him at the 104. We think that he could have a 2,000-yard, 20-touchdown season. I don't know. I'm pretty fired up. This has been fun.
I mean, I'm thrilled. I was just reading off our roster, how fun it was with the anchor running back, the elite tight end in Kyle Pitts, and the 5 young receivers. And then we get these 2 incredible values at quarterback. Scroll up real quick for me, Shawn, on our roster. It was Russell Wilson at ADP 77.7. We get him at pick 93, 16 picks after. And then Brady 84.4 ADP. We get him at 100, also 16 picks after ADP. To add those 2 on that turn after we already really liked everything we had done through the first 7 rounds at wide receiver, particularly getting all that depth, but also obviously starting our running back room with Saquon and getting Kyle Pitts as an elite tight end. We now have a roster that's going to have legitimate upside at every position. Fun build here. So you're starting to fill out the queue a little bit. We've got some running back targets sneaking in now. We do have 5 receivers through 9. It's not necessarily our wide receiver heaviest. We can still look at some receivers, and you've put some in, including Tyler Boyd, to continue grabbing some pieces in Cincinnati and Buffalo, even though we didn't get a quarterback in that game. Boyd does go. We've added Rondale Moore to the queue. I think he'd be a really nice fit with our 2 Atlanta players. Atlanta, Arizona is a Week 17 matchup that could be very fun, especially if you've already made the bet on Atlanta's side with both Pitts and London. I'd like to get probably someone on Arizona, and Rondale is a guy that we like independent of that, obviously. Several running back targets we might consider here: Ken Walker, Rashad White, Ronald Jones, Darrell Henderson. Interesting tight end area too: Pat Freiermuth, Cole Kmet, Mike Gesicki. Options for our tight end 2 spot. Freiermuth would correlate with the Bateman pick, Baltimore-Pittsburgh.
Rondale Moore, Ben, goes 1 spot ahead of us at 116. Freiermuth is there. He's in the queue. He's the 3rd person up behind Ronald Jones and Rashad White in terms of how we had it set. White goes that we're 2 picks away. Ronald Jones, Pat Freiermuth. Are you thinking Freiermuth ahead of Jones here?
I guess I am. Yeah, I mean, I think that would be a nice addition with Pitts to fill out and be done at tight end. We could add Jones. I mean, grabbing a piece of Kansas City's offense and sort of playing them to be a little bit run heavy late in the year. They're going to score points. I mean, you can see that path being one that gets you through. So I can go either way with that.
Well, let's select Freiermuth. There's always that outside shot that Ronald Jones is as unpopular today as he was in one of our recent drafts where he fell to us 2 rounds below ADP. We're definitely going to need a big slide. His ADP here is 123. That last selection was already 124, and our next pick is 15 picks away. But like we had mentioned earlier, the tight end position is looking good. We now have a second-year breakout to put with Pitts, so 2 second-year guys there. Again, if you've read Blair Andrews' wrong read on tight end breakouts, you know that year 2 is when they make that leap. Are you comfortable betting on the combination of Mitchell Trubisky and Kenny Pickett as we look to feather in a Steeler at this point?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a bet you love to make, but I do think his 20% targets per out run as a rookie tight end went a little under the radar because of what Pitts did as a rookie tight end. What Freiermuth did was incredibly strong. It's not just the touchdowns, and people are talking about how the touchdowns have to regress and this and that, and they probably will, but you have the red zone role as well as some legitimate target earning upside that we have seen. Julio Jones now goes in the 11th, so we won't get that stack opportunity to go a little higher as he continues to kind of go all over the place and his ADP starts to just adjust. But Freiermuth is a player I think can earn volume, is a good value regardless. The quarterback situation not great, but I do like the addition with Rashad Bateman. In the big weeks, we're kind of saying this Baltimore-Pittsburgh game, we're hoping for one of the games like they had last year where they came down to the wire and there was a lot of passing and a lot of additional plays late, and that might help us get over the line if Freiermuth and Bateman have big target shares in that Week 16 shootout if we're in contention at that point.
Definitely. So we do wrap back around. Ronald Jones doesn't make it here. The top running back by ADP, Alexander Mattison. I've mentioned that I'm not convinced he's going to be a full handcuff this season with some of the additions that they have made. Darrell Henderson, Michael Carter immediately after Irv Smith, the top tight end. We could go with Albert O.
We have our 2 tight end. Oh, you're just saying in the queue.
Yeah, we do have the 2 tight ends, and the article again today did talk about how 2 tight end is the way that you want to play it, especially there if you have Kyle Pitts. So we're on the clock here. Jarvis Landry is an option at wide receiver, I think, with Michael Thomas and Chris Olave both looking good there. He's a little bit less exciting than maybe he has been at some points.
How about Darrell Henderson as the best available running back? I like him as a nice value play at 1209, very close to where he was going pre-Akers injury last year, and we got more information that when Akers wasn't right, Henderson had a very strong year. So it's a little bit of a bet against Akers rehab, but there's some question marks there. So Henderson is a nice addition, I think. We do, I think, want to consider ways to stack our quarterbacks. With Julio gone, I don't really know what we're going to do in Tampa. And Rachaad White might have been interesting there when had a little bit of technical difficulties and we ended up auto-drafting our favorite running back in the league, Ken Walker.
10 slots below ADP, 4 spots below for Darrell Henderson. All of the running backs below ADP, both of the quarterbacks below ADP.
Fair.
We did select both of the tight ends early, so we're tight end enthusiasts.
Well, good tight end enthusiasts. I mean, good year 2 tight ends we're going to be on. We're back up. Jarvis Landry is still there. What are you thinking?
Well, anytime that you pass on Breece Hall, I think Michael Carter becomes very compelling. And it's, again, another one of those a little bit below the radar types of things. But you have Elijah Moore, the running back 2 with that wide receiver, actually is a combination that does tend to work pretty well. So I like that, even though mainly here again, our idea is that we're picking Michael Carter, and that gives us a 4th running back, 3 really high upside players. I'm going to have an article out looking at the 2nd and 3rd year runners with gaudy peripherals. I had the veteran one recently. Michael Carter is going to feature in that piece, Ben. So I'm excited to have him on some of these teams.
Yeah, we got the Ken Walker, Michael Carter, Elijah Moore stack. Ken Walker runs for 2 touchdowns early in week 17. Jets have to throw. Elijah Moore and Michael Carter are both performing particularly well. I think that a part of the reason you see that wide receiver running back 2 combination is probably that, sometimes when the running back 1 goes down, the team goes a little more pass heavy. We're obviously not wishing for that for Breece Hall at all. But if something were to happen, if he were to miss time, you would expect potentially Carter to be playing more, but as more of a receiving back for them to shift a little bit towards the pass. That would be good for both Carter, but also for Elijah Moore in terms of raw target volume. So we need Ken Walker running for a bunch of TDs, Seattle to get out ahead, and New York to be thrown a lot, potentially in a game where Breece Hall, for one reason or another, is not active. And then you have that Seattle Jets game. I just told a story where that's the winner.
That's your favorite one to target in week 17. And I've already said, what's the over under there going to be? 60? By the time we get to week 17, it's going to be 60, right? So
it's going to be half of that.
load up on those players. Then, there's all this buzz about the things that are happening early in training camp. I was excited to see that Juju Smith-Schuster has evidently impressed with Patrick Mahomes. We love to hear that for a variety of reasons, even if it actually doesn't mean anything. But the one thing I think we can take to the bank is that Geno Smith is evidently hammering Drew Lock in the Seattle quarterback competition. That's great for all of those teams where we drafted Geno in the last round. Again, those are super flex drafts, but it still was a lot of fun. And if you're looking at Noah Fant as a possibility, I think that you want Geno to win that. We're back up with our pick in round 14. And one of the reasons why I might have gone with Ronald Jones is that Albert O and Noah Fant are going to make it to us here. Probably we would prefer to have Jones plus one of them as opposed to Freiermuth and, say, Gainwell. But again, we talk about those young guys with crazy peripherals. Kenny Gainwell right there in the mix.
Yeah, that's a good point. We didn't get a great chance to talk through that because your internet is terrible, but my thought was instead of Ken Walker getting Rojo and Freiermuth, but now that I'm seeing these tight end values, I'm right there with you. But I do think we probably need, we only have 5 receivers at this point as well, Shawn. We got to do something about that.
Yes, that'll be for, we've got those late round favorites, and you've got to be saving up for KJ Hamler at this point. It's going to be KJ Hamler and Russell Wilson for the overall victory.
Yep, so let's go Gainwell. I don't think we really need a third tight end. If I would have known we could get Alberto in at 14.09, I would have been right there with you. Yeah, I'm still just rattled by the Ken Walker pick. That turn really should have been Rojo, Rashad White. Rashad White and then Rojo, because White went before our next pick, and then we bypassed Rojo on the way back. That would have been a nice little combination.
So when we don't win the $1 million regular season now, Ben has placed it at the feet of my internet. That's a lot better than just placing it like at my feet as an analyst. So I'll take that. No problems there. We're moving back through, and you mentioned
you're the one that put Ken Walker at the top of the queue, so don't get yourself off the hook too much.
Oh, that's true. So I am doubly responsible. Then Wan'Dale Robinson, already a starter. His ADP has made absolutely no sense at any point in this offseason. We're at pick 172.
No brainer.
He's ADP 190, But
we already made the bet on Saquon. I like with these offenses where a lot of the intriguing pieces are cheap. It's the market's saying that the Giants are not going to be very good. I think when we make a bet on Barkley, we're betting on Brian Dable improving things, the offense being better, and I think that correlates with Robinson, even if you might not see that type of correlation in broader things. Barkley hitting in the second round is good for the Giants offense. It's going to be good for the potential for Wan'Dale Robinson to be a surprise in round 15. Great sixth receiver there. You've already got KJ Hamler queued up for our seventh receiver. Would love to see him. Alberto finally goes at 15:05. The Dulcich reports are very real. I had not realized the market had adjusted that much on him. But we should be concerned about him. I think he should be falling. But he would have been a nice tight end too with Wilson. But we got the 2-5-6-2 build right now. We did still get 5 good running backs despite not getting Rojo. That is one I would have really liked because that's a game, the KC Vegas game that we don't have any pieces of. A lot of people are playing as being a very exciting game. Certainly one way you could see that not being exciting is if Kansas City basically wins big and Ronald Jones is out there running for 150 yards. We have a similar thing going on with the Rams-Chargers game. I kind of like our Darrell Henderson pick in that regard. That's a really popular stack game. If those lineups are going to fail in Week 17, it might be through Darrell Henderson having a big game. Assuming not necessarily that Akers isn't right, but maybe he just can't be right all season, and late in the year is where he starts to need a little time.
And we mentioned that the Kyron Williams injury is one that should free Henderson up to more or less control the secondary spot in this backfield throughout the course of the season. Williams may factor in at some point, but one of the things about Darrell Henderson, and one of the things that you continually mentioned, and one of the reasons why it really just doesn't make sense where he's being drafted after he demonstrated what he can do last season, is he's one of the most explosive, especially pre-contact runners in the entire NFL. You can say, well, it'd be great if he were bigger and thrashed around and broke more tackles and stayed healthy. I mean, but if he did those things, he'd be a top 4 round running back. And so when you're looking at what people can do for the price, I really like Henderson. So I'm glad that we have him on this team. And as you mentioned, since we are not in on the Chargers-Rams game in Week 17, we're playing it to be more of a Bills-Bengals game. And especially it's still one that we need to be a little bit spread now, so as we don't have the quarterbacks for those two teams. But Henderson is a good kind of out and contrarian play to what very easily could be a high-scoring game. Ben, we're now
Romeo Dubs buzz is very loud now, and he goes here in the 16th round. I just had to give a shout out there. We are one pick away. We're looking at Hamler. You have McKinnon in our queue as well. His ADP not far behind Hamler. I think we grab Hamler here, hope that we can get McKinnon on the way back. I love the idea of adding McKinnon to this build for much the same reason that I was just talking about with Rojo. Although we do have 5 pretty good running backs. We could stop at 5 backs as well. That is one path. I don't mind adding a 6 to this build.
I would probably like to get 6 here to have this be a 7-7-2-2 team. Wouldn't be a bad construction, I don't think, with only having the one top 100 running back. The other thing I was going to ask you about a little bit, obviously we can go with 6-8 and add Tyquan Thornton. We could also potentially add Marcus Mariota for round 18. If our guys do blow up, right? If Kyle Pitts plays well, if Drake London plays well, and I mean, we want them to play well from the start. And so you could potentially add those guys in. And I mean, if they play well, he could make it all the way through, right? So that would give us another way and another out to where these other quarterbacks could get us where we need to be. And then that week 17
But
Cardinals
we're up
Falcons
here.
game.
We're up here with 10 seconds on the clock. Is it McKinnon?
McKinnon, or do you prefer Brian Robinson?
I think I prefer McKinnon.
Okay.
Robinson, there's some talk he's getting the goal line work. I still struggle to see what his ultimate upside would be. It would probably require the Gibson injury, but then you still have McKissick. It might take injuries to both. And then also Washington's just not very good. I think I prefer this as an 8 receiver build. You're adding a bunch of running backs to the build. We have Barkley, Ken Walker, Darrell Henderson, Michael Carter, Kenneth Gainwell, Jerick McKinnon. Our receivers, we went with 5 early, but our wide receiver 6, our wide receiver 7 are more flyer types, Wan'Dale Robinson, KJ Hamler.
I don't think those guys are going to like being referred to that way, Ben.
I mean, they're going to be superstars, but
there we go.
You don't think we should get an 8th here? You would prefer, for our final pick, another running back, or potentially the Mariota pick. The Mariota pick for me is tough, not because of anything you said, because obviously if both of our guys are going off, then he's probably playing pretty well. But I think they can be good, and Mariota does provide some rushing, but he still just doesn't necessarily crack our lineup very much when we have Russ and Brady. And then we still have an option of, okay, if Mariota is benched or hurt and Ritter comes in and is good, our guys can still go off with Ritter. I just don't. We have a lot of Florida ceiling in our 2 quarterback build already that don't know that Mariota really adds anything, even if he's playing particularly well to help those pass catchers. I don't know that. I mean, in hindsight, maybe it's a 2 quarterback build where you take him at the back and you're just like, Mariota's going to be a star. But we do have both Wilson and Brady at such great values that not sure we need a 3rd QB. Maybe he moves the needle more than these flyer receivers, though. And there are good running backs left. Benjamin's still sitting there. We did not get Rondale. We have the Atlanta guys. I think Eno to get a piece of Arizona would be pretty interesting if you were thinking about that seventh running back. Laviska Shenault does go. You have Tyquan Thornton in the queue. We have Will Fuller now in the queue. Fuller suddenly, no one wants him because Julio signed, but, nothing changed for Fuller in the last week other than a different player signing. But now because he wasn't the first one to sign, people are talking about how they had too much exposure to him. There's still a lot of time for him to sign. What do you think?
I think that could go a lot of different directions. I kind of like your note about Benjamin there. He gives us another shot to have a big time running back. And I mean, this is a format where you do need that running back firepower. You want both of your running back slots to score big points for you. And they fill the flex awfully well. Also, if you have the right guy. And so from that perspective, I think that
Shawn Siegele, running back heavy, boomer drafter. You heard it here on Stealing Bananas. I'm going to do it by memory. We had Russell Wilson and Tom Brady at quarterback. We had Saquon Barkley, Ken Walker, Darrell Henderson, Michael Carter, Eno Benjamin, Jerick McKinnon, and maybe one other running back. At receiver, we had Jamar Chase. It is not filling up here on Underdog. With Jamar Chase and Gabriel Davis as a bring back. We had Rashad Bateman. We had Elijah Moore. Davis in the 4th round. Bateman, Elijah Moore, and then London was our 5th. And then we waited quite a while, added Wan'Dale Robinson and KJ Hamler to a 7 receiver build. That is all second-year players or younger. Gabriel Davis is a 3rd-year player. So we got that working for us. And our tight ends are Kyle Pitts and Pat Fryermuth. For those of you on YouTube, Sean's pulled up the board, scrolling through it. Oh, Gainwell was the other running back that I forgot to mention. What do you think? What's your final grade?
I like it. It would have been great to perhaps not have the technical difficulties because, I mean, Freiermuth is probably not where I would have gone with that. But, one of the things that I like to note about these is that it's often that pick that you're a little bit uncomfortable with that does come back and win the whole thing for you. Freiermuth, an excellent breakout tight end. And the fact that tight ends are extremely cheap in Underdog is something that does need to factor into the overall approach outside of, again, getting Kyle Pitts, which I think you want to do as often as possible. And yet, I mean, you don't want to come out of these drafts without any Freiermuth either. And so from that perspective,
but that was one where
it's very exciting.
Yeah, we did have a couple technical difficulties. The board wasn't back up yet, so I couldn't see the board. I was just mentioning to you that I had talked Freiermuth. We were low on the clock. You deferred to me on that. I would have been pretty easily convinced. I've been drafted on FFPC a lot more. I was not aware of the tight end value we might have got later. So I think that would have been a compelling argument. And that probably is the mistake that we made. Unfortunate, but it is how it goes. I don't hate the Ken Walker pick now that we have both Elijah Moore and Michael Carter. We got a little bit of week 17 correlation. I do think Rachaad White with the Tom Brady pick would have been fun. And then your Rojo pick would have been fun as well at that turn. But instead we ended up with Ken Walker and Pat Freiermuth. Later on, we would have been in on Albert O rather than Gainwell, as you noted, probably is where we would have locked up Albert O. Would have been a little bit of a different construction, got us a little bit more correlation into our quarterbacks. Instead, we don't have another Buck, and we only have KJ Hamler with Russ. Not ideal. But
I don't mind that at all because a lot of the other best Brady/Wilson builds are going to be very heavy on the receivers. So you get a little bit of a unique team with those guys. One of the things that happened for Colin and Blair and I last season was that we were basically one decent Jarvis Landry catch away from being able to overcome the Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase stacks. Now, obviously, the number of finalists in week 17 in the 2022 Underdog tournament is going to change the calculation there a little bit. Obviously, you're not going to be able to overcome Jamar Chase this season, which is what we bet on in round one, right, Ben? You can't overcome Jamar Chase, but we do have Hamler here, and we got those guys so inexpensively that we're going to have them with a different type of team, again, than the vast majority of drafters. There are so many teams in Underdog that it's certainly not impossible that there will be other drafters who do get them at a significant discount, but I like the way that this comes together. And certainly from an advance rate perspective, I think this team is looking very, very strong.
Yeah. I mean, stripping aside correlation in those elements, and there's still plenty of correlation among this roster, but you have to like Russ and Brady at quarterback. You have to like Pitts and Freiermuth at tight end. Those are really strong rooms for the onesie positions. We got enough depth at running back later, starting with Saquon. And then getting, again, Ken Walker, Darrell Henderson. Scroll down for me, Shawn. What was the rest of it? Ken Walker, Darrell Henderson, Kenneth Gainwell, Jerick McKinnon, Benjamin. I missed one. But
Michael Carter there.
Michael Carter was the other one. So, I mean, a lot of interesting running backs in the middle range, a couple good flyers late in McKinnon, and those are two of my favorite very late running backs. That Henderson, Gainwell, Carter range, it's a really good tier. Getting three of those guys in that group, very nice to see. Ken Walker a little bit above that group, but also somebody who you can definitely see paths for. I mean, most clearly that Rashaad Penny has not really ever been able to play a ton of NFL football other than the late stretch this past season. The receivers might be the one that the one position group that I'm a little concerned about. And yet Chase, Gabe Davis, Rashad Bateman, Elijah Moore, Drake London, a lot of upside profiles at the top. Wan'Dale Robinson and KJ Hamler are a couple of our favorite later round upside profiles, perhaps the two favorite. It's if it's a little bit of a fragile room, it's a fragile room I'm comfortable going to bat with because there's a lot of intrigue and upside, I think, built in.
Yeah, I don't have any issue with these guys at all. I think that, I mean, you can get used to when you draft a lot of 0 RB and draft in a lot of formats where it's even more powerful than an underdog. I mean, you can get used to having so many wide receivers that you have extreme comfort with all of these teams. And then you have one where, you know, you take Saquon Barkley and Kyle Pitts and suddenly you're like, oh, I mean, we took 2 non-wide receivers in there. But one of the things we talk about a lot on the show, and we'll have our show, one of the things I'm most excited for, Ben, here in August, is the show where we talk about, okay, what is round 1 and round 2 of 2023 drafts? What's that going to look like? And I don't think that Rashad Bateman or Elijah Moore or Drake London are going to be in the first 2 rounds of the 2023 draft, but I also think they're all going to be much higher than this. You know, I don't want to call out any other wide receivers necessarily as part of this particular podcast, but there are some players who are up there in certainly the round 3 and first half of round 4 area that I think have a lot less upside than Bateman, Moore, and London, even for this year. And so you think about, well, if they just have a solid second season, or in London's case, a solid rookie year, those guys are going to go much higher next season. And again, we kind of split this approach into 2 parts, looking at how do we make sure we advance to the playoffs? You know, what's our advance rate going to look like based on our build? And then how do we win in the playoffs? And someone like a Drake London does look like a playoff hammer. Wan'Dale Robinson, KJ Hamler. You talk about the situation with the QBs, and one of the things that I thought was fun about getting Russell Wilson here is it's actually been a few drafts since I got KJ Hamler, which probably sounds a little bit strange. Listeners will know that we like to take him everywhere, but I was very excited to get him back in this situation. And despite all the enthusiasm for Courtland Sutton, and despite the great reports today about how good Jerry Jeudy looks, I mean, I still think that once everybody is completely healthy, that there is at least the possibility that KJ Hamler probably can't get to the volume level that those other 2 guys could get to if everything goes right for them. But if this ends up being sort of a split passing game, I mean, KJ Hamler is Tyler Lockett plus, if you look at it from the perspective of, you know, if he hits right now. Obviously, Tyler Lockett has already hit. It took him a little bit of time to emerge as a collegiate player. It took him a little bit of time to emerge as an NFL player. But once he fully emerged, I mean, there were very few vertical wide receivers, and a lot of it is Russell Wilson, but very few vertical receivers that can offer what Tyler Lockett can offer. If KJ Hamler is able to go through a season healthy, kind of get into his development, and then hit on that upside level, I mean, he's basically Tyler Lockett with more weapons. And so when you've seen that pattern in the past with a similar receiver and obviously this quarterback, and you know that it's a similar kind of idea to what the Chiefs have with MVS and what best ball drafters of MVS are pretty excited about, is just that when you're trying to deal with Courtland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy, and then, you know, if reports are true with Greg Dulcich, then how do you cover KJ Hamler? I mean, there are only so many resources that a defense has to offer when they're scheming up these games. And I don't know, you look at the playoffs, you look at where KJ Hamler is going to be at that point. I just still have a lot of enthusiasm for him. And he's got a little bit of a ways to go, but I mean, the Broncos, it's a new staff. They're excited about all of their new players. I mean, for the coaches, these guys are all new, but they're excited about this mix. Even with the raves for the other guys, I mean, you just cannot find more glowing reports for either the work ethic or what they think is the ultimate upside for really anyone in the NFL, maybe barring Allen Robinson, than KJ Hamler. I mean, they absolutely love him, and obviously we love him.
That gets back to a great point you made at the end of the last episode, but about if you don't like your team at the end of your draft, it's probably because you didn't take enough players that you actually like. Like, just have fun with it. Draft the players you like. We did that well here, I think. Yeah, I mean, KJ Hamler should be a 5th-round pick. as you just laid out. So we really have even more elite receivers than we thought.
And then again, going back to Freiermuth, you look at him in round 11. He shouldn't be going behind Zach Ertz, who went in round 10. He probably shouldn't be going behind Dallas Goedert, who went in round 9. He shouldn't be going behind Dawson Knox, who went in round 8. Those picks are not necessarily bad picks. Freiermuth, not necessarily a home run pick. You could argue that he shouldn't be going behind TJ Hawkinson in round 9, even though that's one of our favorite guys there. Because of the offensive contexts for some of those other players that we just mentioned, it doesn't mean that the players themselves are not good, but they have as many or more red flags than Freiermuth, who really has the upside here to become not necessarily Gronk or Travis Kelce, George Kittle, that type of player, but the player kind of right below that level. And that type of player, again, very valuable on these best ball rosters.
Absolutely. He's a fun one to have in the build. Yeah, I think we dissected this pretty well.